First of all, Pete, let's start with you. Let's talk about tackling such a huge, rich period of history and the particular elements that you uncovered during your research that you really wanted to tease out. Obviously the thing with World War II is, as I used to say to Damien on the phone, there's a lot of it. And so it became a case of finding little nuggets that would then inform the story. I kind of knew vaguely the shape of the story I wanted to tell. Imperial War Museum opened up their kind of archive to me. So, for instance, for Cash's character, I asked if they had any diaries of anything from young women around that time in Warsaw, and within 3 days they'd found me 2 diaries translated. And it was very reassuring because although there was there was one paragraph was about finding decent coffee, the next paragraph was about boys, and then the third line was, I joined the resistance today. It's run by the local scoutmaster. And I think that Richard Overy, the historical advisor, said that people's concerns remain the same. In wartime, they remain the same. It might be heightened and it might be pressured, but all our habits of life just remain the same. And that's kind of really what I've tried to capture in this. And Adam, you directed the first 2 episodes, and then we have 3 other directors who also have 1 or 2 episodes each. So how did you collaborate with them to make sure that the original vision of World on Fire kind of remained the constant?
Well, we had I put together a vision document and a kind of sizzle reel, which was our kind of our style for the series.
So what was included in that?
Well, the main thing is trying to be of service to the script, you know. And when I first read the script and thought about how you'd make it, the important thing was to really emotionally engage with the characters. So we wanted it to be very subjective, and so rather than looking at this world from a sort of an out there view, we wanted to be in there with everyone. And so epic and intimate were the sort of 2 key words. And it was amazing. The other directors are incredible, and I'm very kind of respectful of this idea that we were all working towards.
So for you actors, what was it like? What was the benefit of having multiple directors, and what were some of the methods that they used to make you comfortable?
I think because they all had such different styles, it was really interesting to have that, and it was such a joy for us that we got to play in different episodes with different techniques, and Adam's notes would be very different to Chanya's notes, and I think it pulled out different parts of our characters because we got to play with their different directions.
Yeah, we all had different emotional journeys throughout the story and kind of different chapters, and so it was nice having someone, I guess, bring those different kind of emotional beats to that, and it felt almost like we were telling it in chapters, and it felt like it reinvigorated it and introduced a new kind of energy and a new kind of direction literally each time, which kind of kept it alive and kept it fresh.
Sean, we see a lot of vulnerability from Douglas. He's sort of, a reminder of the terrors of World War I. So how gratifying is it for you sort of reading a script that stays very well away from those stereotypical male tropes that we might be quite used to seeing if we're looking at a war drama?
Do you mean not
because I guess
heroic?
Sorry?
Not be heroic. Or?
Yeah, well, I guess we see him be vulnerable from the off, which is rare.
Well, he is a heroic man in his own way. He's a strong man, or at least he was a strong man before he experienced the horrors of the First World War. And he is still a strong man, though he doesn't quite see it or know it himself. He's a warm-natured man, but he's just trying to hold things together, and he's damaged and fractured, and trying to do the best for his son and daughter.
How much research did you do into conscientious objectors during that time?
Well, I read about it and stuff, but I kind of know what it is, but I read about the kind of isolation and the loneliness of being a pacifist or a conscientious objector, and being ostracised by his community. It takes quite a brave man. He's he's a man of strong belief, and as I said, the First World War coloured his view of the second impending war, and that's not a surprise in hindsight. I think it was a war that we all had to stand up and be counted, but he wasn't to know that at the time. Yeah.
And Cash's journey, without any big spoilers, is full of upheavals, to say the least. So, Sophia, can you tell us about some of the challenges and things that you had to learn for that part?
Well, basically, I always saw her journey as a journey of a fighter, and maybe we don't see it exactly in the first episode, but then we will see it in the later episodes. And she and her family really quickly faced the cruelty of this war, and she will have to fight for some things in her life that she already lost, or for people that she loves. So yeah, she has to then throughout the series she has to fight to win some things back in her life. So that was a challenge, and yeah, well.
I feel like you must have had to learn a lot of skills for this film, right?
You mean
like Do you remember that practice day with the gun?
But is this a spoiler?
Yeah.
Massive.
It's a war story. There's got to be guns.
She's not going to be just a waitress.
I think we can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think we all did this before the shooting. You know, we all had this. What was it called?
Gun day.
Yeah.
It's quite self-explanatory.
Yeah. Preparation.
Tell me more.
Yes. Also, like physical. You know, like. But it's.
I've got a very funny video still of you just really nervous with this gun and then it going off. We can share that now.
Should you do it there? Oh, God.
Harry is our sort of entry point into the series, because quite quickly it's established that he's our sort of common link between the characters. He's not your typical hero. You get the feeling he's quite flighty in love very early on. So, Jonah, tell us about his arc and which parts that you loved getting to know, particularly which elements that you really wanted to draw out from him.
Yeah, it was. I think when you're approaching anything, you're always trying to find ways of if not sympathising, at least empathising. And at times it was difficult, because he finds himself in situations which I've never found myself in before. And I remember thinking I was finding it very hard to defend him, and finding it very hard to try and make him the hero. And of course it was obvious that he isn't. And it was Adam who said the very simple but pertinent thing of, we're not trying to we don't have to defend our characters, we don't have to make our characters our heroes. And actually, if we can just tell the story more truthfully, it's a much more interesting journey, both for the audience and for you as an actor as well, because we meet him at a time where he's well-intentioned and he's full of love, but he's also very flawed and quite reckless and quite selfish. Yeah. And that gives him a really great journey to go on, to learn about himself.
There are some elements of this story that feel just incredibly personal. And Pete, I know that there are some moments in there that you really want to include, which were sort of about your own family. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, my mum's mum was a variety entertainer, and she was in a duo with a woman I came to know as my Auntie Anna, who was a black woman. So they had a variety act called The Two Shades. So that means that my grandma actually invented two-tone at least 40 years or more ahead of it. So, and I never knew my grandma, my Auntie Anna I knew, and they toured the Northwest and played the bright lights of Levenshulme and Longsight, and which, if you know, those are they're like the Vegas of it's an interesting situation,
Yeah.
and it's a interesting situation for the times, especially. And they formed an all-women swing band in the war and so on, and they drove ambulances at Old Trafford. And it just, not only did it give me a way into that particular story, which is clearly honoured by the two characters in it, but it gave me a way of looking at how the war changed things for women, and how opportunities opened up for women, ironically, during the war. So it's nice to have them there. And I mean, I always use music in my stuff anyway, because it means you have to type a lot less. And you still get paid for the full hour. How other writers haven't got onto this, I don't. But the music, you know, the musicality is a connection as well, because obviously when you've got such a disparate set of stories, the music helps to sort of pull the whole thing together. So yes, you're playing my grandma, and that's just weird.
But I mean, fantastically, you're such an incredible singer, Julie. I was so impressed. I love sort of seeing you belt out these like old jazz classics. How was that for you? So did you have to like learn that era of music?
It was amazing because I'd never sang jazz before. I worked with an incredible guy called Matt Smith, who's worked on some incredible projects, and he was really good at kind of teasing the jazz out of my voice, because I went into the first session like, I can't do this. Yeah. And we just got to play, and we sang lots of different jazz songs, and then we found our own style and Lois's own voice, because I think the important thing was we didn't want her to sound like a showstopper. She's still a working class girl, and she sings for fun, and it was about teasing that out. And the fun thing with playing all the songs is all the lyrics meant something different to her, where she was in her story. They relate quite nicely, and I know for Yrsa and I, it's just such an honour to get to sing some of these classics. They've been reinvented over the years, but we were still allowed to come up with our own versions.
What was your favourite?
There's a song in episode 3 called After You've Gone, and we have a great time with all the soldiers, and Lois comes to life.
It is incredibly refreshing to see previously untold stories from people who don't usually get represented, especially during series about World War II. So can you tell us, for example, about the inclusion of Webster and Albert, the sort of gay dual heritage couple?
Is this one for me or for Sean?
Sean, take the stage. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I don't, I want to tell, if any, there have been great war movies, there have been great television series about the war, and they already exist out there. So why not tell stories that people might not have come across before, or a television audience might not have come across before? And I wanted as well to set up something where the irony of pre-war Paris was it was a huge magnet for people who were on the margins, because it was such a bohemian city, including a lot of African-American jazz performers. And then the irony that the Nazis took this city over, and a lot of Americans in particular were very naive about how protected they would be. So I wanted to write that story, and then I wanted a story that was a love story really, and it happens to be two men, and Paris feels like, I'm not pretending that it would be sort of gay friendly in current, by contemporary terms, but at least would maybe allow that to happen, and people might turn a blind eye, but clearly we know. I mean, it's one of those things with this, that because we know the history, or think we know the history, you're always playing with people's expectations of what might happen. So we're ahead of this all the time, and we know that's going to be a relationship that is threatened in the most brutal way. So from a writing point of view, that's what it's setting up.
And well, like you say, the modernity of it is just, it's really enticing. And obviously, you wouldn't want to change the era that this is set in, but I don't know, how do you sort of capture making something, especially the overriding themes, but on screen as well? How do you capture making that feel so modern in the ways that the characters interact?
I think we just played for the truth of it. I don't think there was a conscious trying to make it modern. We just tried to play the truth of it, and
Did you have certain methods? I heard about you, obviously music seems to be like a sort of concurrent theme, but about playing music on set.
Yeah, sometimes
Directors.
popular, sometimes not so popular.
So tell me about this.
First ADs were never that keen on loud music being played, and some of the choices were unpopular at times, weren't they?
Did you chose Pitbull at one stage?
It was wonderful, wasn't it, with the photography scene when we were just all dancing.
Or at the wedding.
At the wedding,
Helen Hunt suggested
Yeah.
playing Van Morrison.
And when Helen
When
Hunt
we-
suggests something, you do it. Do you know what I mean? She's amazing. She was incredible, but she had this wonderful idea. Yeah, when the wedding, we each had a go at being the DJ at the wedding, and it was Helen's choice that Van Morrison that worked best. But yeah, I don't think there was that much of a conscious sort of, because I think if you go too sort of, let's try and be modern, you're in danger of
It being over stylized or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
We were trying to go for a very truthful, naturalistic, real feel.
And I suppose to that end, I heard that you guys sort of created backstories for your characters, so not stuff that we'd necessarily see on screen, but can you tell us how you kind of worked on that together and how that helped when you were filming day to day?
Yeah, definitely. I started my research, like I really dig into like books that she could read at that time, or music that she could listen to, or also Warsaw and what was the city like before the war, and where Kasia would take Harry on a date, or where would they go, or what kind of cafe would she work in. You know, there were plenty of cafes like this, and even more vibrant, and even, you know, with performance and comedians in the evenings. So the city was very vibrant, and so I wanted to catch that kind of spirit just before the war starts.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you did it, but I wrote letters as Lois to Harry, because obviously a lot of our communication would be through letters. So trying to think about the different stages of, you know, when he's writing back at the beginning, and then slowly when he stops writing, and how much she wants to reveal of her vulnerability, and that was a really interesting thing to play with through writing. And also we got sent on some fun dates to get to know each
Did
other.
you?
And, so
What did you do?
to kind of set us up for our Black Shirts rally, we did an escape room to experience like an
It's really
adrenaline.
frightening, actually. Escape rooms. I don't know if you've ever done one. They are quite
I've done
frightening.
escape room, yeah.
Look,
They
yeah.
are.
It wasn't quite as extreme as...
As it, no, slightly different, but
as
actually,
opposed, but, yeah.
a little bit.
You went to a Nazi-themed escape.
We
We actually did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. It was really
Prague.
it was scary.
we were so bad at this.
Yeah, we lost, as it were. But yeah, it was a combination of you know, historical research. It's I think a lot for anyone. I think the Second World War, we know a fair amount of it coming into it.
Yeah.
And so a big part of it for me was trying to build characters that felt very real, and then how they would react and how they would survive in these very extreme situations. And all of the characters go through so much through love and heartbreak and these very extreme situations. And so we were very fortunate to have a week or two just to be together and just to get to know each other, which made it feel much more comfortable. Because when you're running through bombs, or when you have a very intimate scene, it feels difficult coming at that when you're both strangers. And so to feel comfortable with one another and to feel like you could be safe and comfortable, and it was a great, it was thanks to Adam.
Yeah, it was really important to have those shared moments, and we had family nights out, didn't we?
Yeah.
That was
With dinner, Sean.
dinners and
Like you kind of alluded to, World War II is so embedded in our lives, how often that might come to the surface. So what's the experience for you, kind of, you know, knowing that your parents or grandparents kind of existed through this time, to have to revisit that period every day when you're filming? Sean?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Something about my
Just about
grandparents.
revisiting the period of World War II, which was obviously quite a tough time for a lot of people. You know, how was that, having to mentally go back to that period every single day when you're filming?
I don't know. I don't know if you really do that. As Peter said, you kind of have the same feelings as I suppose people in the 1930s and 40s did. But I guess you draw upon things and maybe subconsciously. You know, my grandfather was a seaman. He was in the Navy, and he was serving in at the top of Russia in Murmansk. And you know, I often think about him and away for years. And my dad was just with my grandma and on their own. And my granddad came back, and he was, you know, he wasn't quite himself, but I'm sure there were not many men were. And seen pictures and photographs and black and white pictures of the ship and where he was and everything, and it just kind of, that brings it back. And you know, I often thought of those times and how my own parents kind of reminisced of their memories with the gas masks and the air raid sirens and stuff like that. So I think that's always revolving around your mind. There's always some kind of residue of that with you, and it wasn't difficult to. You go to bed and go to sleep, and then you come back, and that residue will come back.
Yeah.
But it was always. I think it's always there, isn't it, when you're on a job and that. Yeah.
As the impetus came about for a number of reasons. It's slightly a coincidence that it's going out so close to the anniversary, because these things are in development for so long. It was partly because Damien Timmer, who I've known for years, and I used to obsess about World at War, the documentary in the 1970s that Laurence Olivier narrated, partly because they had access to all the major players, and it told the war from multiple perspectives. And I was fascinated by that. And I felt that partly for reasons of technology and cost, really, if you did a British war drama, you'd do a war drama about the home front. And it seemed to me that television in the last 10 years has changed enormously in terms of what's possible, and in the last 5 years in particular. So we always talked about whether there could be a sort of fictional equivalent of that told the war from multiple international perspectives. And it was almost that the time was right in terms of the ability to make it as much as anything else. And then I think we were always conscious that the anniversary was arriving, but I suppose the other decision was that people, you know, and audiences, you know, you wouldn't be allowed to have subtitles. At least 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened on a BBC One show, I don't think, in a drama. And I knew I didn't want those dramas where you have an English actor speaking English with a German accent, and you're meant to believe they're German. Now, you know, as you see, if two Polish characters are in a room, they speak Polish. And so that kind of allowed it to happen as well. And it was just, it seemed a right time to write something about international cooperation and us not being isolated as countries, but uniting to defeat Nazism. It seemed timely. It's probably always timely to remind people of that. So those are the things that came about. But certainly, I think once production cranked up, we knew we were aiming for this time of year for it to go out.
Sean?
Well, I didn't really get out of the kitchen, so I'm unfortunately I didn't see much.
We had a buzz. Yeah, it was really challenging, and we looked around at a lot of different places of where to film, and we visited Poland, and we were potentially going to film there and film some in Berlin, and then we did a recce in Prague. And actually the recce of when we were looking at filming in Poland was incredibly useful for me in terms of, you know, getting a feel for the Polish side, getting a very personal feel for the Polish side of the filming. But we ended up filming in Prague and Manchester and Bolton as well.
And Crewe.
Wigan.
And Wigan. It was Wigan. It wasn't even Bolton. Shit. Thanks, Sean.
Blackpool.
So, yeah, actually, we've got our amazing location manager here tonight who, quiz him afterwards. He did a great job.
Where was the sewer?
The sewer was in Prague. So we ended up, running around, that we ended up filming in Prague and pretending that Prague was Paris, Berlin, Warsaw, Manchester, and sometimes we pretended that Manchester was Paris. Sometimes we pretended that Wigan was Paris. But yeah, Prague, offered these amazing different locations that felt like they captured, our places and made it believable. And we had a kind of idea that all the different spaces had a different identity. So hopefully you don't notice it, but there was quite kind of strict palette rules and shape rules, visual language that we had for each different country. But not that you don't want an audience to see that. You just want them to feel it.
I'd say it was mainly bonding.
I think we did another one. We did a virtual reality as well, where we were walking on a plank and...
Yeah, again, not highly relevant, but still kind of... I think bonding is as having adrenalized experiences together.
I think having a bit of a laugh, because be easy for... I think the first scene to be very serious, where the two characters, they buzz off each other and they're having a great time, and it's only when they start getting beaten up that it's not so funny anymore. But for them, they were thrill seekers, and that's, I think, what they bonded over was they were from such different classes, but this was something where they met in the middle. So I think it's just about having fun together. So in that respect, yeah, it did help.
There was a practical element as well, because all the ideas that I came up with were uninsurable, weren't they?
But yeah, you wanted to do a bungee jump and all that kind of thing.
Awesome.
I want to ask you actually about the production, because of the scale of it is incredible and the detail is just, felt like unmatched when I was watching it. What was that like for you as actors, sort of having that level of detail? How helpful is that for you getting into your characters?
Yeah, hugely. Yeah, it's all part of it. I think when you we had our production designer Paul Spriggs, and along with Andrew as well, created sets that you walked on and felt completely transported, which does a lot of the work for you in a way. Whatever the kind of scene, whether that's when you're the bomb scene or whatever it is, it places you there, and it's very transportative. It's the same with Nick Eade, our costume designer. Beautiful costumes. It's very much a collaborative process, and then all of those things are working really for you. And so when you show up on set and you've done your preparation and they've all done their preparation, it becomes hopefully like a nice alchemy on the day.
Was there like one particular bit of the set that you were really impressed with, that you were like, I just wasn't expecting that to be there?
Yes. Later on in the series, though, it was in Blackpool.
Okay.
Yeah.
The illumination.
On the subject of costume, when are you going to give that suit back?
You only want it back because you want to have it.
That was a lovely suit.
I asked Nick. There were some beautiful. We all got some beautiful costumes were made, and Nick very kindly gave me one of them. I haven't found the right moment to wear it yet.
Tonight wasn't that.
Someone
moment?
asked me actually why didn't I wear it today? I thought that'd be a bit
Spoiler.
weird. Kind of come in your costume.
We'd have
Bit
loved
keen.
it. A mixed opportunity.
Yeah.
This reminds me very much of, I was on a set with my mum once when we were filming a series I wrote called Blackpool. And Steve Pemberton and Dave Morrissey pirouetted out of an arcade. And my mum looked at me nervously and said, "Is it supposed to be funny?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, it's really good then." Yeah, so, the humour's intentional. I think people, when they're up against it, tend to be funny. I think the Leslie Manville character was a joy to write for, because that kind of arch, snobbish humour is a lot of fun, because you like it despite yourself. You want somebody who you don't want to laugh at, but you do, because she's sharp. And I think for Douglas's humour to come through with like the Three Horseshoes gag and all the rest of it is part of a glimpse of the man he probably was. I think. Any laughs I got tonight were entirely written and intentional.
Well, it kind of comes back to that original vision of trying to get the epic and the intimate, but also get the subjective, so that we're not observing it, we're feeling it with the characters and And Dan was amazing with that, and continues to be. You know, still not all the episodes are finished music-wise, so he's still working away, and he's doing an amazing job. And we talked about the first time we met. I had this concept that probably, thankfully, we didn't fully carry through, which was that let's just not use anything other than brass, because it's kind of military and jazz, brass and drums. Thankfully, we didn't do that, but he did. The idea was that we'd sort of distort brass to kind of this. I gave him this note of a crying trumpet, and that's kind of how that last cue that ends the episode ended up. So something of that original idea came through, but thankfully not the whole thing.
I think it's a. It's always an interesting experience as an actor, because all parts of the script are your imagination. How it's a very subjective thing when you're first preparing it. How the person you're reading the scene with is going to be, how they're going to look, how they're going to say their lines. You have no idea. And as you say, your costume, the set, all of it. And so I think we either consciously or subconsciously build the world in our head beforehand. I've never been on a job and walked onto a set and thought that my imagination was better than what had actually been done. So to some degree, I think you walk on and you think, oh yeah, this is partly how I saw it, and that puts me at ease and that makes me feel comfortable, but there's always an element or 10 which so far exceed what you were expecting, that and that it pretty much always happens with the actors that you work with as well, and whatever the elements are. So I'd say, yeah, it enhances it and builds on kind of what you've had in your head.
Is that your experience as well, Sophia?
Well, yes, for me it was, my very first few days of shooting for Jonah, I think, as well, it was in my family's apartment. You saw already the apartment. In the next episodes, you'll see more scenes in the apartment. So we shot this in a few days, and it was very intense, but also I kind of felt like this need to feel immediately like you know, to know the space, to feel there safe, and to like really feel like at home, which was a challenge, because I just got there on the day of shooting, but I immediately felt it, like it felt really like home. It was a beautiful set, like for the first days of shooting. So that was really helpful also.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mine was this kitchen I've been talking about. Great.
What a great note to end on. Vision of Sean sitting alone in his kitchen. Thank you so much to you all for coming, and please give a massive round of applause to our wonderful panel.